Thank you, Madam President. The fires of conflict are raging the occupied Palestinian territory, including Gaza and in Lebanon. And the heat is being felt in Syria too. Spiraling escalation is already having a major impact on Syria and Syrian civilians. I want to issue a clear warning. Regional spillover into Syria is alarming and could get much worse, with serious implications for Syria and international peace and security. Madam President, Syria demands our collective attention. Hundreds of thousands of Syrians and Lebanese have fled Lebanon into Syria, into a country that is itself experiencing escalating conflict. The past month has seen the fastest paced and broadest ranging campaign of Israeli airstrikes in the last 13 years. Dozens of locations across Syria have been hit, including residential areas, even in the heart of Damascus. In total, the Syrian government says that Israel has hit Syrian territory more than 116 times since 7 October 2023, which they say have resulted in the deaths of more than 100 people. In the Golan, some construction activity has been carried out by the Israeli Defense Forces in the vicinity of the area of separation. During this activity, UNDOF observed an Israeli battle tank and excavators cross the ceasefire line into the area of separation. There were also reports of the IDF carrying out at least one drone strike in the area of separation. Pursuant to the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement, no military forces, equipment, or activity by either Israel or Syria are permitted in the area of separation. Meanwhile, late September saw a report of rocket attack from Syrian territory into the occupied Syrian Golan, while the IDF also claimed to have shot down drones launched from Syria towards Israel. Israel says that its actions address targets linked to Iran or Hezbollah, accusing them of smuggling arms into Lebanon from Syria. However, the Syrian government and many monitors too have highlighted the heavy impact on civilians, with alarming reports of civilian deaths and casualties from Israeli strikes, as well as damage to some civilian and economic infrastructure. Israeli strikes on the road between Beirut and Damascus have hindered the passage of civilians seeking to flee and also strangled a critical commercial artery between the two countries. We are now seeing decreasing commercial traffic and gasoline prices doubling in Syria. Madam President, regional escalation appears to have also been catalyzing conflict in northwest Syria in a dangerous manner. There was a significant cross-line raid into government areas by Security Council listed terrorist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, alongside reports of drones out of Idlib and ongoing artillery and rocket fire. Russia has since resumed airstrikes for the first time in months, and pro-government forces have significantly accelerated drone strikes and shelling. There have been alarming reports of civilian casualties and significant civilian displacement and damage to civilian infrastructure, including an electricity power plant feeding a water station. The Northeast is also touched by regional escalation, with reports of attacks resuming on US military bases there, prompting reported US artillery fire. This is aggravating tensions in an area that was already seeing elevated hostilities between the SDF, government forces, and armed opposition groups, as well as some reports of Turkish drone strikes. This worsening situation across several fronts also makes it harder to combat Security Council-listed terrorist groups like ISIL, which still pose a serious threat. In short, Madam President, we are seeing all the ingredients for a military, humanitarian, and economic storm breaking on an already devastated Syria, with dangerous and unpredictable consequences for civilians and international peace and security. I have 5 urgent appeals in this regard. First, Syria must be sheltered from regional conflict. I repeat my call for the respect of the sovereignty, unity, independence, and territorial integrity of Syria. Syria cannot become a free-for-all venue where different actors settle their scores or fuel other theaters, nor a staging ground for attacks or retaliation. Second, regional tensions must be de-escalated now. I echo the Secretary General's call for immediate ceasefires in Gaza and Lebanon. I also express grave concern at the prospect of further escalations between Israel and Iran and what this could trigger as regards to Syria. Third, there is a risk that regional escalation could unravel ceasefire agreements that have, however imperfectly, provided for a vital freeze in front lines inside Syria for almost 4 years. Further work is needed to de-escalate towards a nationwide ceasefire in line with Resolution 2254. We also need to see alongside this a cooperative approach to combating Security Council-listed terrorist groups in line with international law. Fourth, all actors, Syrian and international, including Israel, must comply with international humanitarian law, including the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution. I deplore the civilian deaths, which are rising again, and the damage to civilian infrastructure. Fifth, and finally, let me also remind of the importance of UNDOF's presence and stress the need for both parties to abide by the terms of the disengagement agreement. Violation of the agreement could increase tensions between the parties and lead to a further escalation of the situation in the region. Madam President, I recently conveyed these same messages in clear terms to members of the ceasefire task force in Geneva, including Russia, Turkey, the United States, and Iran, building on all my engagement in New York last month. Madam President, amidst this dangerous kinetic environment, UNHCR says some 425,000 people have crossed into Syria in the recent weeks, fleeing Israeli airstrikes and violence. Around 72% of these are Syrians, the remainder mostly Lebanese. It goes without saying, Syrians must be protected wherever they are, including those moving and those who have remained where they are. The world is closely watching to see whether the concerns that Syrian refugees have long themselves expressed will be meaningfully addressed in this new situation. I hope that all stakeholders understand that this is indeed a critical moment for all to act responsibly and constructively. We have always stressed that there are 2 areas of concerns that the refugees cite. One set related to protection arising from fears of arbitrary arrest, mandatory military conscription, and housing, land, and property rights. And one set related to livelihoods arising from lack of basic services, healthcare, water, electricity, and inadequate housing. In this regard, Let me first echo High Commissioner Grandi's appreciation for the government keeping the borders open for everybody and for simplifying some procedures, working with the UNHCR.